means you all disappear until you start speaking, which isn't ideal, but that's one of the things with Teams. Okay, so we're on learning outcome number 3, so the final section of the assignment. And I've always really liked this whole 501. It's really, I think it's really nice insight into management leadership, because in this one we start to look a bit more at what's going on inside the organisation. We look at a few more theories. This is what we've already done. So we've looked, the first one we've looked at, do you remember, like the mission, the vision, the values, that sort of thing, how it all lines up, the structure. Then we looked last time at sort of whether we change our style according to what our situation is, or whether we're quite consistent. And then this one, we're looking at what it takes to be a good manager or a leader. And we also look at the concept of building trust, which I think is absolutely key to having really good relationships with the people you work with. And so we look at some models related to that. So let's just dive into it in terms of the knowledge and skills. So if we were in person, okay, which is why we can't do this, and we were, Brenna, when you come to CU Coventry, it's a special place. It's a place with no walls. Like literally, we teach in a classroom that had 6 or 7 different classes going on, didn't it? And you have to bring your own walls. It's like got all whiteboards that divide it. It's the most stressy place to teach because there's no soundproofing either.
Oh no.
Oh, it's just a nightmare. However, what we do is I'd get you now to draw, like to do a sort of character of a manager or a leader, and you'd put their characteristics in terms of what knowledge they got, what skills they got, how they'd behave. So I'd like you to sort of talk through and have a think about this. Who do you think of? So if you were to draw, like to think about someone and their knowledge and skills and behaviours of a good manager, what does that mean to you? What would they know? What would their skills be, and how would they behave? So think about anyone that you work with that you think's good. Or
for me, someone that listens.
Okay, yes. So before the people that you'll meet on that you already know, some of them, the characters had very big ears, as you can imagine on their pictures, because listening, and how do they? So are they quieter? What do they do in order to know what's to listen? Do they ask more questions, or what is it?
I suppose acknowledge what you're saying and ask questions, counter ask what you're saying to sort of validate that they are listening.
And I think they have to be genuinely interested, don't they?
Yeah.
There was somebody I know who was or heard of who was former JLR, who went to work at Penzo, the consultancy, and he went in quite a senior role. And at the beginning of his team meetings every week, he said he had a list of things like remember to say hello, ask if mention the football match, and then he put the score down so he remembered it. So it was like the opposite of listening, but he was trying to show that he was like in with the people, but he really wasn't. So we've got a big pair of ears because we're good listeners and we validate and we're checking so it's really going in. What else are they going to do? Or how will they behave?
Give clear direction.
Yes, okay. And again, how would you do that?
Ensuring people understand what you're asking them. Ensuring they understand what you're asking them to do and what is the goal of what you're asking them to do.
That's very good. Yeah, because you're checking then, aren't you? Otherwise, because people could be, if they're scared or nervous, they just pretend they know, don't they?
Yeah.
But don't get it. Okay, fantastic. Any others?
I think for me, it's them being diplomatic.
Okay, so how would you do that?
I think it's very close to like listening and making sure that they are hearing us. It would be very close to that. I don't know how you think on that one, but yeah, diplomatic.
And I think that's it. There are situations where you're asked to do things and they are difficult, aren't they? And that you have to give certain instructions. Or not even instructions, but you have to have certain conversations, but you've got to do it in a way that you're not showing disloyalty to the organisation, but you don't necessarily believe in it, or that you're dealing with people's. If you don't necessarily believe in what someone's got going on, that's important, you can't minimise it either, can you? So there's, yeah, you're right. There's a sort of tact, isn't there?
Mm.
I think it's how they communicate, isn't it? Really, they've got to have quite good communication skills with and understand, I suppose, the different job roles that are either above them and their subordinates and things.
And also the personalities, aren't they? Because that's even hard. Yeah.
God, yeah.
People are it's really, really, really tricky, isn't it? Okay, yeah. So diplomacy, tact, soft skills, and sort of, but they're the ones that carry you far, really, aren't they, career-wise? If you've got those mustered. Zubair, what? Given that you're almost having the opposite situation at the moment, think about someone who, flip it round. What would be good? What would be in terms of the knowledge and skills? And
I think, like Brian had just mentioned, having a manager that understand the role.
Okay, yeah.
When a manager understand the role, they won't just ask you to do something that they know it's impossible to do. So they'll be showing compassion. When you're struggling, they'll know why you're struggling, and then being a coach at the same time, being a manager, show their support.
Yes.
So
you feel that you've got the trust that they've got you back, and more than that, they actually understand what they're asking you to do. So that's where I think these roles where you work your way up and you've been in the organisation for a while, that gives additional credibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which using my example at work at the moment, which I think the problem I'm having, the manager that I report to doesn't quite understand what does my role, what do I have to do, and he's asking me to do silly things, really. Yeah. So
let's move on to knowledge. What specific knowledge does a manager need to have? Any sort of thoughts on that?
An understanding of your operation, or whatever they're leading.
And this is where you were saying about with the role swap, wasn't it, with Adrian, that actually there's certain knowledge that you've got in your area that Adrian will, that it sort of needs the sort of. So sometimes it can be quite technical, can't it? Other times it won't be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and what does that knowledge give you with the people who work for you?
Respect.
Yeah. I think if you haven't got it, they can't respect you, can they? They can respect you for the authority that you've got, but they don't necessarily really have a huge confidence in you.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other knowledge that so we've got technical knowledge or whatever area specific knowledge, what else might?
I think people knowledge is important as well. It's not just work related. It's about trying to look at people and try to understand them, personally, get on a personal level with them,
Absolutely.
I think that's important.
And so when I was teaching, I mentioned them quite a lot because I'm quite interested in this sort of culture at GE Aviation. But the guy, every 4 or 5 years, they have a new site leader. So it's at Cheltenham. It's quite a big site, and they do a lot of work on engines for pilots, the Air Force planes and civilian planes. And the site leader a few years ago did a talk with us, and he was saying what he does is as soon as he joins a new site, he identifies who maybe the sort of 10 people that he's going to work with closest are, and he does a little chart, and he finds out who they're married to, finds out who their children are, and he memorises it, and he tests himself on it, and he builds this knowledge so that he can ask them. And it sounded a bit sort of I don't know, a little bit contrived really, but because they're important to the people he works with, he made a real effort to get to understand what was important to them. And I think that was quite, if you've got somebody who's right at the top of the organisations that's looking at doing that, that's quite a big thing, isn't it?
It is, It shows that the manager cares about you as a person,
Yes, yes. Yeah, so, okay, so we've got some good things there. So knowledge-wise, as Ashley mentioned, we've got the area of work, but there might be organisationally, you've got to understand the way that you do it at your place. So that will have changed from when Brenna worked at the Merlin Group over to the Go Ape sort of area. There will be, are they very different? You've sort of mentioned they are.
Yeah, I would say they are. It is a complete change of like their structure and their culture and how they work. It's totally different. Like I knew where I kind of stood with Merlin, because it's so robust, whereas I wouldn't say it's as robust.
Yeah. So and some of that is almost slightly implicit as well, isn't it? It's not necessarily completely obvious, but it's through the culture as well. So that's like the organisational framework, if you like. Legally, we need to know what we need to know there, in the sense of there might be certain things that really affect your area, and you've got to be so hot on what the latest whatever it is to protect yourselves as well. Because actually, if you don't do it right, you've got all sorts of, like as a manager, you can get sued for hurt feelings. You're going to get, well, you know all this, don't you, Brett? It's just ridiculous, isn't it? The amounts, it's like, why would you ever want to be a company director? Because people really want to be a director, don't they? But with that comes these legal responsibilities, to the point of actually, if people are working for you and an accident happens, and if any way at all that you are negligent or proven to be, you can be put in prison, can't you, for corporate manslaughter? So
be careful what you say at all times, don't you?
Yeah, you have to be very, very guarded. And actually, if you enjoy relations with your team, and I don't mean that in a sort of, the way that some people enjoy relations with their team, but I mean, like if you enjoy getting on with them, you've almost got to make yourself a bit distant sometimes, haven't you? As you step up the ladder, you can't be their mates in the same way. It's difficult. So we've got specific knowledge about the area that we're working in. It could be technological, it could be in certain fields, it will be like sort of more academic, it would be more about theories and things. But also, if you do understand how your team members feel from so some of them might be older members of staff who've got different views. Some of them, like in Brenna's case, you've got a lot of seasonal, sort of almost your younger staff who come in, don't you? And it's just a job for them, so they're not going to give it that extra. But all those things will help you then align what you need to achieve. Skills. So our knowledge is what we know to be able to do the job. The skills are, I don't know, how would you differentiate them from knowledge? The things you do, aren't they?
So it's having the ability to do something.
Yeah, it is ability. That's absolutely right. Yeah. And the touchy-feely stuff, and actually you don't have to be touchy-feely, but you've just got to be consistent, listen, have integrity, show people that you give a monkeys, really, that you actually care about them enough. You do care about the role and the rest of it, but they aren't just a number, and we get them. But also the skills and the abilities might come around the operations, that we know how to do certain things, but that we almost can demonstrate best practice to our team. So things we might hear, it might be about change management, it might be team management, it might be the mentoring. Zubair mentioned earlier that actually a good manager is somebody that you feel mentored and coached by as well. So that's all. It's all quite basic, really, but it's just sort of, if you can relate it to in your role what you need to do, that would be really good. Have you heard of the concept of reflective practice? Brenna has. Has anyone else?
No.
Have you?
Not word for word, but I think it means like, you preach what you do. Is that it?
It's not quite that. It's something else. Brenna, have you done that on your CIPD? Reflective practice. Still there. I think I've got a second. Yeah, I'll have reflected. I'll come on to it in a minute, what it is. Have you seen these quadrants before for time management as one of the skills that you need to have? Because when you're really stressed and you just get everything, don't you? And it just feels sometimes you almost get things done really fast, but you don't prioritise. So the idea with these quadrants are, there are some things that are really important to do, but because they're not urgent, we don't do them. And actually, I'll tell you what, you see my assignment sits in there until it's at the point where you get to the deadline, and then suddenly it becomes important and urgent. But it might be important to start off with, but it's not urgent. And then operational things, life gets in the way, we don't get on with it. So this is quite useful. If it's not important but it's urgent, can you think of an example of a job like that where someone says it's got to be done now, so it's urgent but you don't think it's important? Can anyone think of any examples of anything they've had to do like that?
Yeah, many times lately I've had a lot, like the role that I am in, I have to help finance every now and then to match some invoice. It could be an invoice getting held up for many reasons. It could be a price variance. It could be the goods hasn't been booked in, or one line hasn't been booked in, but the invoice is getting held up. So that will come to me to look at. But because it's not urgent, nobody's chasing for it crucially, I'll just say, oh, I will do it in the next, in the next hour or the next day. So yeah, I do that.
Okay, so you push it back and give them a deadline. I do that sometimes. What I tend to find is it's reporting stuff where people say, and it's on their agenda, it's like, I need this right away. And you're like, I'm actually just about to teach a class, I can't do it now. But they don't care because they need it right away. But for you, it's not even important. So it's just, if you're setting the agenda, then you can, well, what I've done is if something's in your calendar for a couple of months and you keep moving it, just get to a point where you just delete it. Because if it was that important, that urgent, you'd have done it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? But sometimes you're like, I really should do that. But you're like, no, you're not doing it. Do any of you feel that all of this, the majority of your work is important and urgent?
No, not all of mine is important and urgent.
What does it tend to be? What mix do you tend to have?
Probably the first one, not important and urgent, a lot of it.
And is that stuff that's passed on to you that you end up?
Yeah.
And when you say it's not important, is it because it's not important to you, or is it genuinely not important?
There's a lot of there's a mindset in JLR where there'll be a problem and it's react, go and do this now. And sometimes it's, no, don't do that. Just sit back, observe and understand what it is before you start firing changes left, right and centre.
And you know, sometimes, like, and this isn't denial, but some problems do sort themselves out. If you don't have to act on everything, do you?
Yeah, I agree there.
But there's I think when people are operating at high levels of stress, they can't use this very well. They almost just put everything in their list and they build it up. But actually, if you were to use it, this is a really useful way of just looking through what you've got to do. And if you're overwhelmed, you just say, actually, that is in that box, so I don't have to do that. So yeah. And I've heard of people. Have you ever heard of sort of people who've managers that like just basically don't ever read an email, and they're like, if it was that important, they'd give me a call or they'd email me twice.
My old boss was exactly that.
Yeah, one of my managers like that now.
What do you think
of it? I think like he's too busy and he's got a lot of people sending him email. Like you said, if it's not crucial, he will not act on it unless you call him and say, look, I've just sent you an email now. Have you had a chance to look at it?
Which totally defeats the whole object of emailing, doesn't it? The fact you can deal with it on your own time and you've got someone ringing up saying, I've just emailed you.
Yeah, so we had to do that with him. So we had to do that a lot lately these days. Yeah.
It's not ideal, is it? But yeah, I do use this when I just feel a bit overwhelmed. I'm like, actually, what can I strip out and what do I need to? What really has to be done? So that's one that you could talk about in terms of the skills that people have. The strategic thinking process is just making sure that you really are thinking ahead and sort of from a top level point of view and how everything fits together, rather than, I mean, I'll show you because I know how to do this now and press sound as well, I think. Let me see if I can. Because the video was, maybe I can't. Video was good. But I have a feeling when I do it, you can't do. Can you hear the sound on that? Did you hear it?
No.
Yeah. No, it doesn't work, does it? Brenna, did you know about reflective practice?
Yeah, I've done it in the past, but it's been that long. Yeah. I think if you remind me of it, I'll be like,
okay, yeah, that's fine. The video is quite nice, and it's about sort of just the overview anyway of are you sort of thinking ahead, or are you quite macro in terms of being more operational? So that could be worth a look at. Here's your reflective practice, Brenna. So
Yeah.
this is this idea we do. Do you want to talk through it?
No.
No, I'm just trying to share the load of it. Right. The reason, so we do something, we think about, like, we then reflect on how did it go, what went well, what didn't go so well. We can then almost come up with a different way of doing it. Can we do it in a different way? And then we experiment with that different way. And actually, based on our experience, we basically, this could almost be like a continuous improvement cycle. But the whole point of doing this is you're not entirely action oriented. Sometimes you're building a bit of space to actually give yourself that clarity as to how did that really go. And I have a manager, the level up from Barjan, so Barjan's boss, and Friday afternoons are reflection time. And I just think, God, imagine having that much time that you can actually dedicate Friday afternoon to thinking how things went, how lovely that must be. But he's big into coaching. And actually, this is almost like, actually, Brenna, when you've got your weekend off, you won't be thinking about work, but you will be thinking about, you know what I mean? And suddenly you're like, that's how I do it. It suddenly clicks, doesn't it? Or actually, that's quite misaligned. There is, in some countries now, I think in France, they're really, really keen that people actually take their holidays, like their work holidays, because this is the sort of thing that if you're not careful, people have burnout, but they've never get into a better position because they're not actually stopping and thinking about what really happened. It's just from one thing on to the next. I've always been very skeptical of like reflecting. I've always thought it's a bit self-indulgent. And that's me being really mean. And there's a CMI module called reflective practice. And like out of principle, I won't teach it. I just think it's like, no, but I can't, it's not a natural thing that I do a lot of. But do you think it has a value?
I think it does if you have the time to do it.
And do you think it's that important that we should build in the time?
Not all the time, because I think we all do it naturally. Like you says, like if I have the week, because I've got the weekend off, I probably will end up thinking about work situations and what could, like, for instance, for work for me, I would probably do reflective practice if I had a major incident, which I have had a couple this summer. So I would probably do what's worked well, but that's kind of just a normal reflective of any situation that you would do. I kind of agree. It can get a bit wishy-washy, I think.
And I sort of do, I know I'm recording this for you, Adrian, if you do actually watch it, but I sort of do the wanking sign that when anyone like does it, I'm like, oh, for God's sake, what a load of, but I think it has got a value to it, and I think we do naturally do it, but we don't necessarily build in the time and talk about it. And I think to be effective, you do. If you're not doing this to some extent, you're always going to be making the same mistakes.
Yeah.
But do you think certain cultures, like I can't imagine JLR that you all sit and like reflect?
we do a thing called lessons learned. I don't know, would that be the same as reflective practice?
I think it is, but I just think everything with JLR has a different language to the rest of what everyone else does, because it sort of has a slightly macho language, isn't there?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it is, to be fair.
It is, because it's a really macho culture, isn't it? So that will never get relabeled as reflective practice. That will always be lessons learned. But I think that is, and then lessons learned, and then how would you take that through to what, like, implementation, which is the conceptualization. What would we do in a different situation, and then we have that chance to play with it. So although I knock it, I think it's just getting the balance right, isn't it?
I think for me, it depends on the role. Like, I use this obviously a lot when I was in HR, because that's, in the nicest way, a lot of what you do is reflecting and thinking outside. Whereas I think my more operational roles, like I said, you haven't always got the time to do it, and you do tend to think there's more important things.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's culturally what area of the business you're in, because I work with other tutors. They are a bit sort of cardigan wearing, reflectors, and I was just like, oh, for goodness sake, you know, this is this is not what I signed up to. Teaching management and leadership, for God's sake, you know, we need to get on with it and make it happen. Not, but yeah, I think there is. I think it does vary according to the culture within the organisation as well. So in this bit, this is really quite straightforward, and it very much is based on your own experiences here. So we know in terms of knowledge, I mentioned before, so we're looking at knowledge, skills and behaviours. So our knowledge is the thing, so actually you could talk very much about the science, you know, what we talked about earlier when you were saying about the sort of specific knowledge you got around the paint shop. And, and Zubair, you will have incredible knowledge on the suppliers that you've got and, you know, in the roles that you've had. You might, Brenna, even bring in some of the fact you've got some of this HR experience as well, because that could help even in the operational side, that you know that you can be compliant then, and from a legal point of view as well, doesn't it? Skills can be those, the listening skills that Ashley mentioned, the tact and diplomacy that Brenna mentioned, and the coaching that Zubair mentioned. Delegating is done properly is a real skill as well. And again, Ashley mentioned about not just giving work, but checking that it actually they understood and the clarity on that. I think technology as well, when we, especially as we're starting to work in different ways, if you've got somebody who is managing or leading you that is comfortable with the technology, I think that instills massive confidence actually, that you feel supported in that. And actually a big question, it sounds like something children would have, but this idea of time management, people do get really stressed because they feel they've got too much to do and they don't know what to do first, do they? So I think again, if you can, and I think for managers, this is a particular, when you've got so many problems coming up that you're dealing with. Operationally, you all work on that. Some of you have been managing projects as well. You all lead in managing teams, and managing change, that's inevitable, isn't it? You're going to be working to budget, you're going to be working with people, you're going to be trying to grow and develop them. So I think all of those are relevant, but don't just repeat it. Try and build it in how you use those in your work scenario, and which would be most helpful. Because it might be that if you don't have financial responsibility, you don't even mention that in this section. The whole thing with it is not one size fits all, but there are some key characteristics at a certain level that you'd share.
Hannah, just before we move on, when it says it's a profile, what exactly is that? It's because obviously it's different from a report.
Yeah, okay. So going back to, let me just open up the sort of workbook that I've done. I saw it as more like a bit of a, it isn't a job advert, but it's sort of more describing it in that way. Right, create the profile. Yeah, it is. So you could just have different sections, a bit like the knowledge you'd expect someone to have, the skills that you'd expect them to have. Do you know what they're trying to do is just tart up a report to make it sound more exciting? Okay. So you can just answer it as you've done all the rest of them, but if you wanted to build it up a bit more like a job description, you could do. Like with essential and desirable, but you don't have to. Okay. So next thing we're thinking about is communication in the role that you've got as a manager or leader. Have you ever seen this model before? Shannon and Weaver's, which is quite an old model. Does it look familiar?
No, I've never seen that.
Zubair, have you? You're looking a bit perplexed.
No.
Okay. And Brenna, is this something you're familiar with?
I feel like I have seen it before, but I wouldn't know any detail over it.
Okay, so let me give an example of it. So our information source might be a message that we've got to convey somewhere. So let me just switch my lights on as we're getting a bit darker. Okay, so we've got, it might be an announcement that we're opening a new factory, new site or something. So we've got a message that we want to convey. Okay, so that's your information. So, and it's coming from, it might come from head office or something, but we've got something we've got to work with and something that we need to get out there. And we need to articulate that into a message. And our transmission and the way we do that is going to be our choice of words, our choice of media. So bear in mind, this is quite an old-fashioned framework, 1963. So what we'll do then is we'll work out how we're going to actually transmit it, and that's right in the middle. So we could stand up and do, JLR call it like a town hall, they do it, or some big sort of company-wide communication. When that communication is happening, there will be additional sources of noise. Now, by that, it might not be literal noise. This is anything that distracts people from hearing the message. So it could be, oh my gosh, we've got an unexpected, because we have what's called Vice Chancellor Road shows at Coventry Uni. And it could be this sense of they've called an unexpected one. And so because of that, we know something's going on and we're like, are they going to start announcing redundancies? So the noise is the fact we're not listening properly to it because we're worried about all these other factors. It could be things such as, it could be that the room isn't big enough or the room's overcrowded and there's distractions, but it's just anything that takes away from the message. Then we've got the receiver. So by this point, we've crafted the message, we've decided how we're going to transmit it, we've delivered it, and then the receiver is the audience of that. So this is based on, they're listening to it and they're interpreting it. We've got all sorts of potential issues there, because if we're using certain language, it might alienate people. Certain people don't like some presenter styles, or they just don't like the person in general, so they sort of almost diminish, you know, they're not listening anyway. And then we've got the destination is actually how it's understood and what's done with it next. So if you think about something like this would be used if we were creating an advertising communication and we wanted to do this, so we consider all these different factors when we're going and what results we wanted at the end of it. What's the disadvantage of using this model? Can you think of anything that it doesn't take into account?
It's like the information's flowing one direction only, isn't it?
Exactly that. It's called linear. Yeah, and more recent, they've done some more recent models, and actually, particularly if we were looking at advertising, the more recent models, you'd have your influencers, and actually have multiple steps of communication where you don't just have one information source, you then have a couple of different sources. But also, there's no feedback loop here. So we're not checking, we're not doing what Ashley said when we're communicating with someone what they've got to do. We're not saying, so just to can you just put that in your words and just talk me through how you're going to go about it? So we've got no check-in. And actually what this could mean is it's horrendously misunderstood. You know, really, it could be disastrous, this could, but we're not, but we've thought it all through, but we've not necessarily taken into account all the things that could go wrong. So this is the example that I gave you as I was sort of talking through it. So this idea of like what we're going to present, we're doing it as a presentation, they're interpreting it, and we're choosing the words carefully. So it's all very crafted and well thought through. And then people interpret it in the way they interpret it. And there's also a concept of a black box, which is this idea, a bit like an aircraft has one, that we don't always know what's gone wrong in that process, because there's this processing bit that even people aren't aware of what they've done. Does that make sense, or the way that they've processed it? How would this be helpful to you as understanding this process? How does it help managers or not? You know, can you think of any reason why it would assist your sort of, if you were thinking about doing a communication, would it, thinking of it in this step-by-step way, does it help?
Depends what you're trying to get across, I think.
Yeah.
If you want it to be very direct and don't really want any comeback or any questions, and then yeah, but if it's not, you wouldn't really use it if you was about to present something that was up for discussion.
Yes, or you could use it. This is a one-way communication, so yeah, I understand that. But actually, what you do in the middle one, you'd change that. So you might set the scene, but you change the middle bit to a discussion. So instead of standing up and presenting in the middle, you'd have a roundtable discussion. But you're right, it would change the process. So I think what works well about it is the understanding that you've got different choices at different stages. So instead of doing standing up in front of an audience, you might say, actually, we've got people on different shifts. We're better off doing a poster. We're better off doing this, that, and the other. So what I quite like about it is it sort of makes you think through the process rather than just always doing the same thing, like we're going to send out an email and it also makes you consider, do you want feedback? And if you want feedback, you change your channels, don't you? And it can't be one way. So yeah, it's the one way is the key thing. But if it's just telling people something, it's got a reason. So when we're communicating, we need to think about just what Ashley was saying. Is it that we're putting something out there, or is it that we've got an idea that we want to discuss? How can we tell if they actually understand? How would you do that? How would you check that they've understood the message?
Ask them.
Yeah, it's harder though, isn't it, in a big group?
I mean, yeah.
So their reaction, how they feed back to you, whether they are negative about it or positive, that kind of will give a hint whether
Even their expression.
also,
yeah, verbal communication from them, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to think, how much opportunity do we want to give for people to actually feedback their ideas? Because that might mean we deliver something on a team basis, in which case we have like almost like a roadshow of ideas that are sort of to groups of 8 and we have discussions around them. But actually, yeah, so it's sort of that. However, and also I think the importance of it matters as well, because that might change the speed of it, but who delivers it? Because if it's seen as really, really key, we need to make sure someone very senior is delivering the message, otherwise it won't be listened to in the same way. Give me an example of a situation where it's really urgent to get the information out there. Can you think of a work situation?
Well, from a production point of view, if there was a customer complaint about, say, a fire in a house on a brand new appliances, somebody ring the company, say, oh, okay, my cooker caught fire, literally just bought it like 2 days ago. So this is an urgent situation. It will need to get communicated very fast at all levels in the factory, and it will need to be act on it as well very, very quickly.
Yeah. So there's massive implications from a damage point of view. Do you know what? Sometimes as well, it's not necessarily so urgent because that one's important as well, like huge implications. You know where word's going to spread like really fast, and you've got to get it out there before they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like I had some bad news to tell some learners yesterday, and I did it in 15 minutes. I rang every single person, because as soon as I told person number 1, WhatsApp would have been out. So I was like, because I personally want to make sure that they feel we've told them that. So I think, and did you hear anything yesterday about the party at Coventry, the university?
Yeah, it was all over the news. That is even true. All the students' party.
Yep. Got an email as well from the Vice Chancellor about
what, telling you not to party?
Did
he see you in it? Were you in the video?
That's giving you an invite.
I wish. God.
That really wasn't a very good day. So we had a Vice Chancellor's roadshow yesterday, and he started off by talking about the party, because the university isn't in a great situation at the moment. So the last thing you want to do is raise more negative publicity, because it was national news as well, wasn't it?
It was in the parliament today.
Was it? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was reading that earlier.
Wow.
They mentioned that, so
you can tell we're in a really strange situation where a student party is discussed in Parliament, isn't it? You can tell the world's gone a bit like, well, obviously not mad because we've got like pandemic, etc. Anyway, So also another consideration is where are our team? Because if we've got teams in different areas, we might have to do it in a very, very different way. Or we pay the money to actually transport people over if it's that important that they come together for it. And then this one, the scope for misunderstanding. Do you know of any company communications where they have really been misunderstood? Because anyone got any good examples of this? I can't think of.
I suppose I've got one. It's not like a really good example, but this year, the board of the company, of Go Wave, the leadership team, they decided to record themselves and send this out via email to all the employees. And you know, the thing is that the things that they were saying, it kind of left a lot of questions unanswered. It was all obviously COVID related, and I know that they didn't have the answers, but left a lot of questions unanswered. And then what happened was, us as a management team didn't know half this stuff, so we had all of our instructors phoning us up, messaging us saying what's this, what's that, and we were kind of like, well, we don't know ourselves, we can't give you that answer. And it just kind of looked quite badly on the company as a whole.
And that is where you've got, there's you are in the line of fire and you're not being given the information to answer the questions, are you? That's really poor, actually, because you should have potentially been given the briefing before everyone else. But I don't know. Well, how do you think they should have done it differently?
I think so. They started off really well. So during lockdown, they got all like the site managers and activity managers, and we were all on our own Teams meeting, and they started doing that, but they kind of just sacked it off. And then there was like these major decisions made, which obviously we didn't know about, but then they decided to put it out to everybody else, and that messed it up. So I just think if they went back and talked to the site managers, because as well, they know their team. And it's all different for each site. It's all individual, and like other sites have very testing personalities in some of their teams. So it's you know the best way to handle that situation with them and get that information to them.
But they're just taking a bit of an autocratic, haven't they? Just getting it out there and then leaving everyone else to pick up the consequences.
Yeah, not great.
No, and that also, I mean, we given the COVID situation and also people being on furlough and things like that, one method, you can't just say everyone's coming in from, well, you can't say at the moment anyone's coming in for a meeting anyway, can you? Because of physically that's challenging. I mean, someone was talking, I went to a friend's for dinner last night and her partner was telling me about a Teams meeting he went on with 2,000 people as their members of their team, and then they had a smaller one with only 800 of them. Like that's nothing more than just, that's like transmit, isn't it? It's like watching YouTube. It can't be anything else. But I do wonder with yours, Brenna, whether they could have had like a question and answer sessions or something. But it's not going to be, it's got to be real time, that has, isn't it?
In defence of them, after that, I think because they got so much like bash, they then decided we're starting to get loads of questions from the management team about the questions the instructor asked, and so they created like a form. So that was like good afterwards. But it should beforehand, if they had any questions about what was going on, put them in, and then everything could have been answered like properly.
Yeah, and going back to the model I introduced you to, actually, if they'd done it better, they'd have done a bit of testing on someone listening and interpreting the message. And if they'd have done that on this model, then actually they might have preempted some of what you'd witnessed. So there is an option in it. So this bit is really straightforward. We're just looking at the communication process, but also what options have we got. So when would you use a report?
We run reports every day to confirm how the day has been.
So they're quite technical, are they quite detailed?
Depends what we're reporting, but some of them can be really technical. Some of them can just be detail of overall numbers or figures.
But they tend to be structured in a certain way, don't they? They give informed, they don't tend to have much bias in them. They're just presentation of statistics and performance, really, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
I think in more sort of 6 monthly reports, they tend to be quite detailed and that sort of thing. Yours are a little bit different because they're produced so often, whereas often reports take a lot longer if they're sort of for the board or whatever. How many people are fans of email?
I like email because it's, if somebody can say, well, you haven't done it, well, I have, because there's the evidence that I've asked or it has been done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know when someone's trying to get you because they say, do you mind putting that in an email?
Yeah.
Like, oh, right, okay. I know what's going on here then. It's that audit, isn't it? What do you think, Brenna and Zubair? Are you liking emails?
Now are overused, but yeah, I used to do the same. Like, I like talking to people, but then like if there was any specific information that I would give to people or they were given to me, I would say to them, I need it in an email. It's just like you say, it's audible.
It's covered, yeah.
It's just a clarification as well, because I think a lot of times when people are speaking, whether let's say that's in like an actual meeting, things can get lost, and the actual facts then just need to be put down in an email.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Flowcharts and checklists are quite nice, but they're not used or do you use them at work?
We use flowcharts and checklists if it's stuff to do like engineering. So just validating that process has happened, we'd follow that flowchart and then you check off afterwards to confirm, yep, that has been done, that has been done, that has been done.
Yeah, I use checklist a lot as well every week because I have to manage like 28 suppliers on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
The way I do it is I divide it into my just-in-time suppliers and then my long lead and then my extra long lead. So I use a checklist every week. As soon as I deal with the just-in-time one, the top priority one, and then I just tick them off and then I move to the long lead one. So by the end of Friday, I look at the list. What have I done? What have I not done? So it just helped me keep track of the work really, which is good.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Meetings. Do you have more meetings than you should, or do you feel meetings are used properly? Do you feel like sometimes, like your work life is just one big meeting?
Lately, we're having a lot of meeting. Normally we have 2 every day, 2 production meeting, one in the morning, 8 o'clock, one at 3 o'clock. And then in between that, we talk with suppliers as well. So we'll have about 4 or 5 meetings a day at Greensmaster. Yeah. Sometimes I think it's not necessarily that I am on those meeting, but I have to be there because it's one of my suppliers. So I just, like waste an hour where I could do something more productive. So some days I think it's overused. Yeah.
Do you have them, Brenna and Ashley? Do you tend to have them at like beginnings of shifts and things?
Yeah, so I have like a morning site meeting every day and kind of just talk through numbers and all that kind of jazz. But then actual like management meetings and things like that probably have about 5 or 6 a day. But again, a lot of them I do feel is like they're creating a meeting for a meeting, and no work is actually made and done. And you could, in all fairness, you could just pick up the phone, talk to them about it, and that'll be done.
Yeah, there's a habit, isn't there, of them? Do you have a lot, Ashley?
Yeah, so there is a lot of, you have a meeting for a meeting in JLR, but every morning I have an operational review to understand the last 24 hours, and then I basically redo that review with my boss and his boss.
Oh wow, okay.
So, but trim it down to they don't need to know the ins and outs of everything. But we have a lot of meetings where you'll have a meeting and then somebody will put a meeting in to confirm what's happened within the meeting, and you think that don't need to happen. That don't.
Yeah, there is a benefit because also Brendan and myself are talking about sort of being salaried versus being hourly paid, and when you've got a team that are hourly paid, you don't get many meetings because you have to pay them. So you just tend to find,
that's so true.
It is, isn't it though? Because they're just like this. They actually cost out the overhead, whereas they don't realise if you're paying everybody to go to a meeting anyway, you might not be paying them extra money, but you're still costing the business a lot of money. But yeah, that's. And then do any of you have like sort of communities online or anything that you use? I suppose Teams maybe is more like it now. Do you have like chats and stuff going on?
We have a it's called Slack, but it's basically just like
project management tool, isn't it?
Yeah, we use that, but we use that for our instructors because they all come in at different times and different things like that. Sometimes it's just easier to get info across, but we have different channels because we have our open and close checks, so they have to send pictures and different things like that when they're opening and closing rather than when they're down on the ground. So
that's good, because it's sort of what they call it, it's like asynchronous, where you don't have to be on at the same time, do you? But you're collating the information, you've still got the records. Oh, that's a good example, thank you. And then we talked, Ashley mentioned before about sort of how we check in terms of active listening. Obviously, it's very hard to understand what the interpretation is of some communications like written ones, because you're not checking, people are reading it whenever they go past. Ashley, do they still send out like letters to people's houses? Because they used to always do that, didn't they, when they were offering redundancies?
A lot of it's all done by email now.
Oh, they've really gone high tech, have they? But
anything
also,
to save money.
Well, it's saving money, but there's also a factor of urgency, because if you're trying to get offers or things out there to people, it's timing, isn't it? Because you don't want it landing with certain people at a certain time, and then there's the uncertainty, am I going to be offered it as well? I suppose if at least with an email, everyone gets it at the same time, don't they? You'd think anyway.
But not everybody uses emails even now. There's people that work for me that go, I don't have an email address. I don't want to use emails. So it's not always effective.
No, and also just spam filters and things anyway don't mean it doesn't always get there. The people who don't use email, is there anything that they've got in common apart from the fact they don't use email?
They're of a certain demographic age.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, if okay. No, I won't tell you. It's been recorded. I was just going to say, if they were widowed, they'd learn to use the internet, because they'd be online dating, wouldn't they? It's just because there's not enough free.
There's to do so, yes.
I'll tell you what, there's enough need. And the other thing is, because of online dating with older people, they've got all this, they've got real problems with STDs in the older, because they're not able to use condoms, are they? Because they can't get pregnant, with the 80-year-olds. So anyway, enough rubbish trivia. And we've got more and more digital now, which I think is going to. Do you think there will be more of the Teams meeting? Do you think when we are allowed more back on site, which obviously you all are, but do you think we'll carry on having all the sort of online meetings?
Yeah, I do. It's changed the dynamics of JLR massively.
Yeah,
but I think a good face-to-face meeting is good sometimes. Especially if you need to have a battle with somebody. It's not the same context over video, is it?
Well, especially if they start buffering when you get stuck in and you're like, I can't hear you, and you call those there's and you know what? Again, back to that model, online stuff. There's more noise, isn't there? Because there's more potential distractions. There's dogs barking in the background, all the rest of it, and I don't think you can read a situation so well. You just can't, can you? You can't see what people's responses are. You are literally seeing a very small aspect, aren't you, depending on the quality of what they've got.
Yeah.
But I think we're changed forever in terms of what the blend of communications will be.
Online though saves money, doesn't it?
It does, especially if travel.
Yeah.
I know,
save the travel, save the lunch, the sandwiches that used to present in the conference room. Yeah, you have that.
No biscuits.
No biscuit.
Bring your own. So when we're thinking about communications, there's lots and lots of different factors that we need to consider. The issue we've got with, so depending on what we're trying to convey, but also if it's really sensitive, there is a massive risk if we're going to do it online. And I think there is, because actually, say, for example, I'm talking to you now, I'm very conscious anything's being recorded. So if we wanted to, because what I'll do as well, I will save it and I'll put it on YouTube so that Adrian can access it, or you can. But that, you can imagine that with Teams meeting, I think people would rather it was face-to-face. If we've got to talk about something that's really confidential, we don't want a recording of it, do we? Because it gets leaked. It could do. It depends on how fast we need to do it, though. So again, when Brendan was saying about like digital sort of meetings, if we need to do it really quickly, again, it's probably easier to do it online, isn't it? Especially if, again, it's across sites. But it's the number of people involved. It depends on how people are feeling. So if you've got a meeting that you're trying to set up about people feeling isolated at work, and then you're getting everyone dialing in from home on this Zoom, you know, so it's you've got to bear in mind, like, I just try to think, do you think is it easier if we'd got some bad news about potential redundancies, and you've got to deliver that news, how would you prefer to do it?
Face to face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Face.
Yeah.
Yep. And what's the advantage of doing it face to face?
Body language makes a big difference, I think.
I do. And who from? What, from them or from you or from both?
Both, I think.
I don't think you can express emotion in the same way online.
No, I agree.
And actually, I think sometimes if you're delivering a message where actually you're really bothered as well, I think that goes a long way, that you're not just seen as like they couldn't even be bothered.
Yeah, I think it makes them seem like they're almost like a coward if they don't do face to face. And you know, like with redundancies, there is that whole consultative part of it, and I think you're more consultative when you do it in person.
Yes. I've got a face-to-face meeting on Tuesday, and I think I'm going to get sacked. Not from this role, like from one of my marketing clients. And I know this is really bad, but I almost want to say, look, if you want to sack me, can you just do it via email? Because I'm so busy, I don't want to go. And do you know why? They're doing it face-to-face because the business has changed and it's about COVID, and I think they want to reduce their spend. And I totally understand. But I'd rather not spend 3 hours travelling there to only get told I can't even invoice them for the travel because I'm tagged. But do you know, no, I just mean they're doing it with the best intentions, but I think sometimes you don't realise what the perceptions, like how the person's going to respond, and actually they won't realise, I can see it's coming and it's absolutely fine, I've not gotten a problem with it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's I do agree though. I think when it's more sensitive, you allow the questions, don't you? Allow the emotions. You can then give people support if they need to afterwards, or direct them in the right way, depending on what you're sharing with them. So this one, this is quite nice, and 750 words. That's like a whole page. You know, this is getting quite big now, isn't it? It's almost quite serious. So we're looking at how you choose what techniques you're going to use when you're communicating. So we've got all sorts of factors. Do we need to get feedback? We've got different methods, which are like the written ones, the verbal ones, online more and more. And I think what I like about this is I think you can have so many examples. I would refer back to Shannon and Weaver, and you could actually talk it through in terms of like a message that's been delivered and conveyed, and examples of the noise and things. But do think about multiple forms as well. So actually where you might, if it's a really important one, where you might do a face-to-face meeting, but it's followed up with a comprehensive email about what that means. So just the idea of a blend is quite important as well, but also the factors, the sensitivity, because actually if it's really sensitive as well, you don't want to start the meeting until everyone's there, and then you explain that, don't you? You know, what we're going to share in this meeting is not and actually any breach of that will be seriously taken and investigated. So you set the parameters. But the key thing of it, we've got to know, is how much engagement do we want? Do we want them talking back? Do we want to get their ideas? Are we sharing just facts and figures, or is it about opinions? Is it information they already know? Like in Ashley's case, the daily reports are going to be quantitative information, because it's going to be, you know, some of it's numerical and it's very familiar. So actually it won't take anyone long to pick it up because they know what they're doing. But if it's new, we might go through a different process and do a presentation with it. So are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
It should be so similar to what you do all the time. So we talked about skills and knowledge before, and we did mention behaviours. But this is where we start looking, I think, at sort of what we're expecting from the people who take us, who basically manage us. So we've got this idea, which is, have you ever heard the expression that a person is not their behaviour? Have you heard it? It's sort of a sort of coaching thing, really, that what I mean by that is sometimes people behave awfully, actually, and they do really bad things, and they kick off at work. And the idea that a person isn't their behaviour is actually sometimes we don't know what's going on. So we don't know if they've got things going on at home, if they've got real worries about something. But you sort of almost, all we see is the evidence, doesn't it, in terms of what they're behaving like. But here we've got to consider that you've got your particular attitude about certain things, which will then translate into how you behave. And then you've got the person you're managing will have their attitude about things. And it might be, so Ashley, what's your, give an example of your attitude towards work, for example.
As in what sense?
Well, how do you feel in general? How do you feel? So think about, we're going to look at somebody that you're managing, and we're going to look at their attitude as well. So if we try and think of somebody who you're quite different
to. So I'm very driven at work.
Yep.
And I manage some managers who aren't as driven as me.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me, that does.
Yes. So
but sometimes I'm probably too driven.
Okay. What would you say? So your attitude is that you're very driven, you're very committed to it, it's really important to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So your behaviour is what then, because of your attitude?
If I know somebody's trained in something and they understand it, I expect it to be done.
Yep. Okay, so you've got high expectations of others. I also think you are very accessible at work and when you're out of work, because it's that important to you. It's a priority. It is the most, you understand it gives you a good lifestyle, and in return you give it everything, don't you, really?
Yeah.
So think about someone who's different to that then. What's their attitude?
So my old boss was not a motivator, not a driver, but that impacted the whole team. It slowed the whole team down because he wasn't there being the captain of the ship, leading it forwards. He was just like, it is what it is, and do what you can do. And that used to drive me up the wall as well, because I used to think, you should be the one kicking us with your size 10s around the facility, and you're not. You're just going, we failed.
That sounds exactly like my workplace at the moment, what you just described, because we have this manager who's, getting paid to do all these big jobs, but he's just sitting around, allowing me to do it and my colleague. But we're looking at him and saying, okay, but you're getting paid to do that. What are you doing? You're just sitting down, busting people,
Yeah.
I feel demotivated because of that.
And then that can ultimately change your behaviour, because actually, like, why should I if you're not doing it? So you just see there's sort of there's a cycle, and actually you can rub off on different people. But also with Ashley's sort of enthusiasm towards work and his drive, people can feel threatened by that. And I have that when I work. People don't necessarily like working with me because I'm like, they feel like if I'm answering emails too fast, there is an expectation they should, and they don't like it. So it sort of can feel misinterpreted, whereas it's only because my attitude, if you're doing your assignment, I want to get back to you really fast because I'm so pleased you're doing it. So it's not because I'm trying to show anyone up, but do you know, there's a real scope here for misunderstandings, isn't there?
Yeah.
But also there is a real responsibility as a leader to demonstrate your behaviour and your attitude are very closely aligned with the organisations. But that can be about demonstrating actually that you respect work-life balance. Do you know what I mean? So if that's what the organisation's about, but it could be, you've just got to, it sort of needs to be aligned with the organisation as well. So behaviours, there's all sorts of things listed down here. Ashley's talking about the drive to achieve. Resilience is it's coming up more and more, isn't it, in terms of a sort of quality that we're looking for in people that work for us. Do you see different levels of resilience with people that you work with?
I do.
And not questions it, but what puts people's resilience to the test?
When they get questioned.
And is it like whether they're...
If people ain't got the answers, you can see how resilient they are because people start cracking.
Okay. And then what do they do when they crack? Do they go off, or what happens then?
You get people that panic then and react and maybe make the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
Because they've not been prepared in the first place.
Yeah. And I do think the working from home, the lockdown thing, if people were all put on furlough, has really tested people's resilience.
Has tested me, definitely. I hated being off.
Well, because work's such a key part of who you are, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And your identity. So I think there's quite a lot here in terms of that's quite subjective though as well, and very personal to how we are. And this is really tricky because we want to get the respect and we want people to be, but actually people's behaviours are quite different, aren't they? But we've got certain things that are considered to be really good practice. Positive behaviours would involve being quite entrepreneurial, where we're looking for new opportunities as we're going along, being inclusive, making sure everyone's involved, being genuine in the way that we do it, valuing a diverse team, so the different age range of people that we've got, the different ages of the types of experience, but also that we're able to change things, so the agility when that we're resourceful. So they're like qualities, these are the behaviours. So just there's a really lovely list here of things that you think, but you might add to that as well, that and it might echo your company's values as well. So you operate within the values and the code of conduct, but you should set an example. Do you think as a leader or manager, that's what you should do, that you should set an example?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because actually, if you're not doing it, why should anyone else?
Yeah.
So we've got, again, this sort of almost in the behaviours that we'd expect to see. If we feel we've got a manager that procrastinates, or somebody above us that does that, how does that make us feel?
It can sort of demotivate you.
That's what I was thinking. If someone just isn't getting on, I used to work with somebody, and she'd say, "I'm just not in the mood at the moment for doing this." You're like, "Oh, for goodness sake," It's just, it does demotivate. So we've got here, procrastination is one thing in terms of unfocus. Now this is really interesting because different organisations have different attitudes on this. So the idea being that if we're not careful, rather than managing almost to fill the time. So I teach on Tuesday morning and Friday morning, and I teach on the full-time degree, but I teach in the online session. And I do lots of work around it, but I just do 45 minutes of live time, and we do like these fun exercises and stuff, and it works really well. I've been told what I should be doing is being sat in front of my computer for 4 hours in case anyone drops in, rather than doing that. And actually, that's not effective. And this is this shift here, because some organisations, it's about being present rather than doing a good job. But organisations are really scared about shifting to almost like a trusted position, aren't they? But I think COVID's made people shift, doesn't it? Because actually they can't necessarily monitor how long they're on actually doing keystrokes. And, do you know, they've had this ties in really well with this sort of attitude with trust. So have you seen any shift in culture where you've worked over the last sort of 6 months or so in the trust with the employees, or is it just the same when you've got back on site?
walk away, it's gone the opposite. I think our trust has. We had more like trust on to do our own business at site, whereas I feel now they're taking more ownership away from us.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
And do you think that's because they're panicked?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So they're like micromanaging, aren't they?
It's a weird one because they're saying that we've got that like responsibility to do what we want almost. Mm-hmm. But then every day we're getting tasks coming through saying we have to do this, we have to do this way, we have to do it that way. Ooh. And and that to me is not effective at all, because they're constantly applying us with stuff, but we actually don't have time to do the things that they're saying to do. Whereas if they left us to it, we would probably be able to get it all done to a good level in a short space of time.
Yeah. Yes, but that's trust, but also they're trying to be efficient by saying this is why you're managing your time, and actually what you're saying is let's be effective because we know what way we're going. And this is this shift here where actually, and I do think from everything that I've heard from the SVO way, it's always about improving the effectiveness. They're constantly trying to do things, to innovate and take, and that's part of a cost out approach, isn't it?
Sometimes though, it's too much.
Well, how lean can you get? It gets ridiculous, doesn't it?
Sometimes you try and improve it too much and you can make it worse.
Yes. Give me an example of how that, what sort of thing are you thinking then?
So, for instance, we've gone through a manning change at the minute where they've taken 35 heads out of the operation, and it's actually worked really well. It's made the facility leaner, and it's just given everybody more responsibility. But now they want to take more heads out because it's worked. They think we could take more heads out, but you can't. You can't take any more heads out.
You just can't do it anymore, can you?
Mm.
That's really, because then puts pressure on everyone else as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who thinks they are good at delegating?
I do, but I used to be weak at it when I first went into management.
So what changed?
I just realised that there's people getting paid to do stuff that I should be making them do and not me doing it. Okay. But the reason why I used to do it, I think, is because I was scared of it not being good enough. Right. So I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of work like that. I would say I'm not the greatest at delegating, because when I do delegate, the task is not necessarily done to, I suppose, my standards. So I have to go back and do it again anyway, so I might as well do it.
Wow. Don't you just delegate the stuff? Don't you? Does everything have to be done to a certain standard?
I suppose there's the bare minimum, but I have quite high standards, and I think the reason that I've done so well and the site's done well is because we've had those high standards. So I don't want to let that drop within the team. And unfortunately, that has happened, and it causes too many issues. So that's why sometimes I'm like, you know what, I know that I'm doing it right, I'll do it that way. And sometimes no amount of training can make them change, and I think that is more their behaviour than my behaviour, or the fact that they can do it, they're capable of doing it, but I think that's more of a conduct thing, whether they actually want to.
Yeah. It is really tricky, because if you can't find the right people to do it and they do it at the right quality, you're a limited resource, aren't you? And you're always going to be a barrier, even though actually what you it's just you need a team that's better than you, don't you? That's the ideal world. That's what really successful business people do.
But sometimes as well, you're limited because you're limited on what you pay. And
so you can't get that
clientele because of what you pay or what the job actually involves.
I totally understand. I do think not everything needs doing. I think there are different jobs at different levels that you can, and it's sort of identifying which ones it's okay to do at 70% okay. But you're right, there's certain ones that are crucial for the success of somewhere, and really, really successful people who run businesses are the ones with the attention to detail, who get every detail right, which is why you've had that personal success. So I do understand that, but I also understand the price you pay for that. and it hurts at times because you can't leave things alone, can you?
Well, that's when you can't switch off.
Yeah.
And I mean, like it says, yeah, I'm on holiday, but really, am I on holiday? I'm still getting messages and things from people, and it is an element of trust maybe from me with my team, but I don't know. It is hard to switch off.
Yeah, it's if it gives you something, I suppose it's just if it becomes a problem, and yeah, if it doesn't give you the life that you want, then you need to maybe look at what you do about it. Because sometimes there is the case of actually, if you never give people a chance to step up, they can't, can they?
Yeah, there is that too. Yeah, absolutely. It's trying to strike that balance.
Yeah, no, it is difficult. Have a look at these quotes on delegation and tell me which one you prefer, or which, yeah, is your favourite.
Third one down for me.
That's nice. I like that one. Yeah.
I suppose I actually really like the top one. After everything that I have just said, I'm not great at like practicing it myself, but I would like, in terms of my manager, I like to be given the space to be able to get on and grow.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the problem is I'm not necessarily always given that to my team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one. I suppose it's not being a busy fool, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I'm also liking the first one, yeah. But then again, you're limited to the reward as well. So if you're working in a team environment, you go with the first attitude, then you'll be questioning yourself. So if I can do it, why should I be doing it? If that next person is dedicated to do it and he's not doing it and he's getting paid for it, so
yeah.
it kind of stop you, limit you, isn't it?
Yeah. But it does increase your capacity to what you can do if you can just start to do it. I think maybe, Brenda, the key is to just start with little things and just see, a little bit of and build your confidence in them. But I think, yeah, it's.
I think for me, I think it's more that I have done in the past and then they haven't been done. So again, it's more of a trust element with the team that you've got, trusting them to do the stuff, and you've given them that, I suppose, that space to do it. But because they haven't done it, I've had to go back to the start with them.
Yeah. I've totally got it because I've sort of run the small bit marketing business, and what I've done is when I've stopped teaching people who've been really good at master's level in marketing, and I've asked them and they've done freelance work for me, and then I've taken it to clients and it's got spelling errors on the front page, the company name spelled incorrectly. It's just like, it's mortifying, and really you can't devolve the responsibility. It's still my responsibility to have checked it all through, or worse still, they let me down right at the last minute and then it's not done, and I just take them because it all conflicts with your own values as well, doesn't it? And then it gives you this experience that, like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to make myself vulnerable because it's your personal reputation, isn't it?
I mean, in terms for me, anything that happens with like directly under me, my duty managers, so anything that they do, because I'm the one that does all their training and everything, I think anything that they do wrong, even if I've taught them how to do it, or they don't do it to what I taught them, it's a fail on me, not a fail on them, because clearly something has gone wrong for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's just accepting responsibility at different levels, isn't it? And it's not blaming, but it's supporting. Actually, my favourite's the same as yours in the terms of a great leader. I like this, and I really like this idea of actually giving praise to the people that have done what they've done.
I always do it.
Yeah,
if there's people that have done stuff like in the team that work for me, I always make sure that my boss knows it's them that's done it, not me.
Good. Yeah, because that's about integrity, that is, and that's also allowing them to just get the recognition they deserve, isn't it? It's just as you should do, but people don't, do they?
No.
They blame when it's not them, and then they accept all the praise when it wasn't them either. Naughty. So we're looking at now. So we've got about trust, respect, and support within teams and individuals. So what we're going to look at here, so only 450 words, so it's probably a big half a page, so sort of, slightly more than half. How do you create a sort of an environment for trust and respect with your team? So I think the slides are slightly, I've repeated this one before, haven't I? Okay. When you think of trust in terms of a management capacity, what do you think of? Or the whole thing of trust, respect and support, what does it mean to you?
Safe environment.
Okay, and how is it safe?
It's like staff should be able to work freely and knowing that they can fail. There is room for failure.
Yeah.
And also, if there is failure, that your team can always come together, especially the manager, and boost you up in a way like that.
So, because especially if they're saying to you, try and innovate, try and do things differently, and as soon as you do, they then penalise you for it. There's a sort of level of, I don't know, delivering on your promises, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
It kind of kill your confidence. Will I want to take the chance next time, even though you can do it, but you won't be doing it?
Yeah, that's some good points. Ashley and Brenna, what do you reckon to this? Trust, respect and support?
I think if you haven't got trust, respect or support, it can be really demoralising and demotivating. So my boss now took over in January this year. We didn't have mutual trust, we didn't have mutual respect, and we definitely didn't have mutual support.
And how is it going for you now?
Complete opposite.
Okay, what's changed?
I think he had an opinion of me that he had a negative opinion of me when he come into the business or come into my area of the business. And I said to him when we sat down, I said, I'll support you 100% and I'll be there when you need me to be, and etc. etc. But he made a comment to me a couple of weeks ago and said, we've come a long way since the start of the year. He said something along the lines of, you like me now? I said, I've always liked you. You didn't like me. That was the problem. So, but now he knows that if he needs me to be there, I've had to go and head up some pretty tasty meetings for him lately, where it should have been him being there, and I think he respects that I've gone in and took the brunt for some of his mistakes, which I don't mind. If that's what I need to do, then that's what I need to do. But it definitely makes a difference, because I had a bit of anxiety going back to work after furlough, thinking I'm going back into a workplace where I don't trust my boss and he doesn't trust me. We don't respect each other, and he's not going to support me. And that's not a good mental place to be.
No,
I don't think.
No, not at all. No, it's not, because it's you're living on fear, aren't you? Then, and you can't perform on that basis. So some of the things you said then, it's earned and it's built. It doesn't just happen. I do, but also I think it does come from people not understanding each other. So they hear something and they don't see the full picture, and then Brendan, what's your experience of it?
So yeah, it's very similar to the others. It's quite interesting actually. So with last year, when I started at Go Ape, it was a brand new site, and I went straight in as an activity manager. So part of my role, obviously, is managing the team, and I'm not necessarily that the instructors do.
Yeah.
But because they were brand new instructors and everything, I had like the quickest training package for me, and then I had to then go and train the instructors. Bear in mind that I'm probably not at that point qualified to do that, and it was quite a learning experience throughout the year, because I kind of felt at times, how can they respect me if I can't actually do the job that they're hired to do? because of some of the technicalities and things.
Yeah.
And I do think throughout the year it was quite tough, and I did have, I suppose, employee relation situations where there was no respect for me in what I was doing, because obviously they just seemed to think that I was an instructor and that should be my job and that I should be doing certain things, whereas that's not what my role was. That was not what my role is. So then I had to, it took quite a long time, and I didn't feel at that point I was getting the support from my manager, and he can understand that, like, you know, I'm brand new to the situation as well as these instructors. They think that I know everything off by heart, which I don't. So I wasn't really getting the support from him, but it's worked out well in the end. I had to just be honest with them and say, look, guys, I don't know as much as you in this situation. I'm going to do my best to try and learn and grow with it. Because this is my job role. This is your job role. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And they didn't understand all the behind the scenes stuff that I had to do.
Yeah.
Luckily, it has really worked out, actually, because there's certain elements. I was like, okay, well, I need to be able to do what an instructor does. So I made it upon myself to go out and be that instructor for busy days. And now I know that I'm in a position where the information that I'm giving them is right, and actually it has kind of turned, and I do feel that they are respecting me now. I mean, it's not always the same team as last year, but because I know what, like, the problems that arise with them, that I think that trust builds there.
And you understood each other's roles, what you were good at, you were honest with them, so that's where the respect came in, I think. And there's something that, again, it sort of echoes what Ashley said as well, and it's just this idea of time. And you can see how people go into environments and they're not shown this straight away, and then they leave very quickly, don't they? Because a lot of people who start jobs don't stay very long because they don't feel they've got these. But sometimes it's a bit of a work in progress, isn't it? Especially a new site.
Yeah, you've got to it's hard work. You've got to persevere. I mean, for me in particular, I was in a brand new role where I had to learn technicalities that, to be honest, I never had done before. I had the management side and the HR side, that was fine, but the actual kind of operational side in terms of the Go8 specific stuff I didn't have. And then we had like new activities coming in, so I had to contend with that as well as being an instructor. It's been, I suppose there's that resilience there. You've got to be able to get through it, but it is time. Like, I'm in definitely a better position this year compared to last year because I know what I'm doing.
Built there, isn't it? So there's, again, I've got a few quotes here that I think what do you think of these? What do you reckon?
I believe in the bottom one massively.
Yeah.
But historically, JLR is fear and submission.
Yeah. Do you think it will go back to that with the new leader?
I hope not.
I hope not. Okay. Do you think different parts of it are still fear and submission? And
100%.
I do that.
So that meeting that I went to, I was saying earlier, for my boss, that was with what we call growlers, just men that bawl and shout. That's all it is. But it's just old school bullies, really. Old school bully mentality. And I've seen people crack. I've seen people in the arenas where they crack and they break. You got to be really resilient when you go into it. I don't think it's right at all, but you're never going to change that part of the business. Well, you will when these people leave the business and new people go into the roles. You tend to see that the younger leaders in the business aren't ballers and shouters. It doesn't get you anywhere, does it? All you do is just wind people up and just turn people away from you.
Yeah, but yes, there's obviously something they get out of it, or they wouldn't do it, but they're not looking at the bigger picture, although they're just entrenched.
Because as soon as somebody starts raising the voice to me, there's like an automatic switch. I just turn off in my head.
Yeah, because absolutely.
And I've even had people go, "You're not listening to me, are you?" And I go, "No, I'm not. Not if you're going to shout at me. I'm not listening to you."
It's just noise, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's not helpful. Brenna, I'm looking at the first quote and I'm thinking about your delegation again as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really
like it's have a go at your. I totally don't mean it, but yeah. Have you heard of transactional analysis with the parent, child, and adult? So we've got 3 different states that we act in. We are a child, so that's where if we were you and I we're having a bit of a laugh together and we're just being a bit silly, then we're like playful children. But sometimes you can be like a naughty child, or you can be sort of seeking approval. Then you've got the best way to operate is where we're adult to adult. Okay, so if you're adult to adult, we have a serious it means that we can get stuff done and we can sort things out. Or we're an adult, or we're a parent. So sometimes if you've got, so if I'm saying to you, I'm finding things really hard at home and la la la, and you're saying to me, oh, it's going to be all right, you're doing really well. You're acting like a nurturing parent. I'm acting like not a naughty child, but you're helping me. We're doing parent-child. But if you, if I was saying things really tough, and then you're going, well, shit happens. So you're like an adult just going, it happens. You just got to get on with it. You're not giving me what I want because I want you to be the parent when I'm the child. Yeah. So you have these different states. It is, and it's called transactional analysis. But if we are almost being a parent to the children and not trusting them in your team, you're not acting adult to adult. I had this conversation with my friend last night about my relationship with my 18-year-old daughter, and when it works is when we're adult to adult. And then when I'm fed up with her for staying out all night and not telling me, it's parent to child, it doesn't work, there's friction. And then she acts out more, etc., etc. But she is a child. But do you know what I mean? So but this isn't about parents or children, it's just about the different states that we're in. It's quite interesting. It's not necessarily something to bring in here, but it's certainly something that helps you understand the psyche of, and particular like close relationships, why they don't work sometimes, because one of you behaves like the parent, one of you behaves like the child. And actually,
I think there's a lot to learn from a child as well, Hannah. With my son as well, I realised, when he was a bit little, sometimes we'll, get into like little silly arguments, but the next day morning he will wake up. It's like nothing ever happened, and then I kind of buy into this concept from him. So I try to do that every day. I don't dwell on things. So if there's a problem at work, today I just go to work today, deal with it, and then tomorrow I just come to work. It's like it never happened. But you need to train your mind to be able to do that.
There's sort of a fresh, isn't there, thinking that's just lovely, and a fresh perspective and no baggage that we sort of learn and then don't let go of. But hold on, sorry. In high performing teams, so this is where trust comes in. If we really, really want to do well, our team feel we've got each other's back, so we really trust each other. And actually, if it's not going well, I think when I think of the best friendships or the best relationships I have, this matches it. Because the friends that I really am invested in, or the people that I really like, if things aren't working out, if something's gone wrong, we can talk about it. So this idea of being able to address conflict because you feel safe enough, it's not going to be the end. We're strongly committed to the success of the team, to the success of the organisation, and actually we know our roles. And if we were to cock up or something were to go wrong, we'd say, look, that's my fault, that is, I'm really sorry, this is why I did what I did. But actually we don't go, well, it was so and so did that. We actually feel this is really adult to adult. This is really where we feel sort of quite enabled and quite confident, really, because we're safe. And that's what you said, Zubair, wasn't it? In an organisation where you feel trust, you feel safe.
Yeah.
And because we've got all of this, we make stuff happen and we get the results. And this is the utopia, isn't it? Imagine working somewhere like that, where you, and actually at times you might do, but it's very difficult to always feel like it. Just me, because even if it's the ideal workplace. Have you got any comments on that as a sort of series of characteristics?
No, I agree with all of that.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's like because I think with trust, you sort of know what it is, but it's quite hard to define how do you get there, and this helps you understand how you get there. And this is another thing about trust, and this is something like, if you do have issues within a team when they don't trust each other, if you share a little bit, honestly, your perspective on people changes so much, because you don't realise that about someone. And so actually, if you share too much and other people don't share anything back, you feel very vulnerable, because you've exposed yourself, haven't you? So there's this idea, and again, this happens with just bonding and making relationships, where we give a little bit, and if we don't get anything back, we tend not to do it again, because we feel like we've been sort of a bit, I don't know, exposed. So if you can create something, this is why sometimes people do things like the team building events, because they're making themselves vulnerable. They're putting themselves in a different position, and actually through that you can build a different sense of support for each other, rapport with each other. But I think this does come with time as well, because almost if it comes too fast, it's not necessarily built on the right foundations. It's sort of too quick, too much too soon. So things that you might do if you have got issues with trust in your team is sort of have something where there's little key things that people share about themselves, but in a safe environment. So like their proudest achievement, or something about what makes them most nervous about a change that's coming up is X. If you get them to start doing that, people will see each other quite differently. Because there's a lot of bravado, isn't there, in some, I think particularly in the sort of maybe the JLR world as well. So if you've got something coming up and you're asking people what concerns you most, but it's just whether they're willing to share it or not, isn't it? So I do like this concept of vulnerability, but I think without an underpinning that you've just got to make sure people don't feel it's going to be used against them. And that's a difficult one. And actually, and this is why I was saying about like what you could do as a team exercise, start off from a position of strength. So actually what I bring to the team that I'm working with is X, and then something I find difficult or struggle with is something else. That second bit is what makes people like each other, because they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realise you felt like that. You always seem so confident, you always seem so and so. I had no idea. And it's really strange. That is the bit that makes you connect with people.
And I think that's what happened with me, to be honest, with the team last year, because I didn't have like loads of issues, but because obviously they didn't understand, and when I honestly just was like, this is where I am, I'm not an expert in this, and I've never said that I am, it changed everything. It changed the whole dynamic.
Yes. We weren't being a fraud then. And you've never been a fraud. You never said that, but they made assumptions.
Yeah.
And another thing that happens is people create stories in their mind. You'll have stories about yourself, but people have stories about you. Oh, she's coming in, she's doing that, she's doing that. And actually you're saying, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm really out of my depth on this bit of it. And they're like, oh, well, in that case, you know, it's, yeah. Oh, that's a really good example, that is. Thank you. And then we've got another trust model, which is about the characteristics of trust that underpin really good relationships for managers or leaders. So if we're able, you help other people achieve what they want to achieve as well. So through your ability, you're empowering. You're not keeping it for yourself. You're actually facilitating things to happen. Unbelievable. That's lovely. Where you've got integrity. If someone tells you something and says, look, please don't share this, you absolutely don't. You wouldn't do that. You've got just people feel really trusted, or that you are to be trusted. Connected, you were bothered, you genuinely care, and actually you enjoy their successes, but also if they're in pain, you know, you've got to be careful you don't take too much on, but you do take enough on for them to know that you aren't just interested in what they're producing, you actually like interested in them as a person. And then dependable, and this is that you don't flip, so you don't suddenly have these sort of like Ashley's example of the shouty people, where you're not sort of they make 1 minute and then you throw them under the bus the next. You're quite solid in how you do whatever you say you do. You have your own code of conduct and you follow up on what you promise. And I like that. Yeah. What do you think? Because they're quite simple concepts, aren't they? But they're sort of almost good core values to become trustworthy. So I think with this, we all know, especially that sort of that one and that one. So the ABC and then the Laconis, because you could use a quote on that as well. You can find it somewhere. With Patrick at the bottom, and use that in. They're the two models: the triangle and the trust model. So in terms of creating a culture for professionalism, trust, and respect, the sorts of things that you're going to look at here are certain personal qualities, actually. But then, as I say, have a look at the ABC trust model, and then just the dysfunctions of the team, which is the Laconi model as well. I'd include those and just talk about how you could use them. But again, do you think you'd find that one okay to?
Yeah.
I think this is so practical. All it is talking about your own experiences, but using some frameworks. And then the remainder of the slides here are just things that I've put on Moodle for you. So they're all there. And what I'm going to do with Adrian is I'm going to contact him and ask, and you know what I was saying about not doing the session on the Tuesday, but doing it on the Thursday. With Adrian, I'm just going to make that suggestion that whenever he's at work and he can spare an hour, we'll do it at a mutually convenient time.
Yeah.
And I think then, because I just think running through it, watching a video isn't as good as because Brenda and Adrian, you did it on Tuesday, didn't you? And it just means you get it.
Yeah, it was good because you can have those conversations and really get into it.
Yeah, and you can check your learning and you can write notes that are totally personal and almost to the point that you don't have to keep coming back to it then, do you? Especially if you get the time to do the assignment quite quickly.
I think it's good being recorded though, because you can revert back to it and have a look at it again. You know what I mean?
I was absolutely not suggesting I stop that, but just saying that's supplementary, but not the main thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to switch the recording off now. Has anyone got any questions or no? All good. So you're going to let me know if you need any support next week, or it doesn't just end next week though.
Is it the 10th? It's got to be in.
It is. I think it is. It tends to be about a week or so after when we're finished. So that would. I'm not sure if it's 10th. Hold on.
On my calendar, it says 22nd that it needs to be handed in.
Yes, it is the 22nd, and I know that because
I'll tell myself the 10th, so at least I've handed it all in early.
You know what's happening on the 22nd? I'm actually not going to mark it because it's my 45th birthday.
Oh.
How old, eh? Yeah, so I'm going out for a day on my own to celebrate because that's what you do when no one cares. No, no, I'm going out to London for the day, so I'm really looking forward to it. Come back with a special virus, I think. But anyway, Ashley, do pretend it's the 10th.
I'll stick to the 10th.
It would be so nice to have them all just done and dusted, and I'll always mark them very quickly anyway. And if you get a chance to submit before, let me know, and I may be able to mark before as well. So
okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for tonight, and let me know if I can do anything. So as I say, there's no talk session next week. Really happy to help. I won't just sit online, so just let me know if you do want some support, because otherwise my Tuesdays and Thursday night could be quite dull, really.
Yeah.
I just contacted you through email if I have to, Hannah.
Yeah, we'll do absolutely. That way. But if it does help, it's always there. Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you. So the next time, should we just talk about when we're going to have our next class is Zubair? You'll be gone, won't you?
I'll be gone by then, yes.
Yeah. Onwards and upwards. It is 3rd of November.
Oh.
Is it? Yeah, it is the 3rd of November. Yeah, and then Guy Fawkes night. Gosh, you're not going to be go aping on Guy. You're not going to be doing fireworks and go ape, aren't you? Because that looks.
No, that'd be it's a hazard.
I know. I was thinking it'd be really entertaining though, wouldn't it? But probably not very good. So we'll start again on the 3rd. Zubair, when are you going to start your degree?
In January, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or can I start any sooner? Because I'm not liking the fact that I'm going to have to take a big gap because I get too rusty with my writing and reading and stuff.
Yeah, they submit on the 30th. I think there is a chance you could turn it around and start with them, which I think might be the 7th or 14th, but we really need to act quickly if you want to do that. Zubair, as you are currently not in work in the day, do your assignment as soon as possible. Like, genuinely whip it in, and then we'll try and turn it around so that you can start sooner.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'll try my very best to submit it next week if I can, end of next week.
Do drop me a line though, because I don't get automatic notification. Ashley, it makes diddly squat difference if you do yours earlier. Not that, but you're going to anyway, because you've said it and it's recorded. but only because yours has to be after Christmas, just because you've got the other module.
Okay. What happens now with, because obviously we had that, it was a bit of a, excuse the language, ball ache to apply the last time. What's the process for this next year? And is there any way of can we start doing anything up front, or because I'm just conscious that last time it was backwards, forwards, and
yeah,
you know what I
mean. I wonder whether it might be worth actually you going on site and talking. Customer service are actually very, very good. Like, they are really well trained at what needs doing. And your colleagues have had exactly the same thing again, where they've just been messed around left, right and centre, not knowing if they're going to enrol on it, all the rest. We shouldn't need it to happen. The other advantage you've got over your colleagues is you're starting at a different entry point. So they've started at the busiest time of year when everyone's just snowed under.
Yeah.
So Adrian's obviously tried to start the process by saying, what do we need to do? But at the moment, you're still having a 2-week waiting to get back from emails on registry. It's just awful. If you're anywhere near it at any point in time, go in.
Okay.
And just talk. I mean, I need to sort of support you in the sense of you've completed the CMI diploma, which I'll always like do. Bargain will mark it quickly. But there are different strands. So there's there's registry is one, enrolment's another. So there's all these different departments, and for some reason it seems far more complicated than it needs to be. And the other key thing is to do online learning, you need access to the platforms.
Yeah, and that's what I'm just thinking about. How can me and Aid get, at what point can we register to, I don't know, because it weren't a very straightforward process.
No, and it won't be. And it's even knowing what the link is for the right course to register onto. Because you're doing a full-time distance learning course. It's just ridiculous, but there's a part-time one as well. But really, I know you're part-time, so it's sort of understanding all those things. But I don't have the right information to give you, so I don't know what they are. But I would consider going in. Okay. Did you find it, Brenna, when you enrolled and things? Was it
it's a bloody nightmare. Like, I didn't know what I was, in the nicest way, I didn't know what I was applying for. And I remember, because originally I applied for the 4-3 course, but I wanted to do it, like you said, it's full time, but it's part time, and that really confused me. And I was like, hang on a second, I can't do it full time. I've got a job, but
it's called something different. It's this, that, and the other. It's just, so the more you can do it where you get away from emails, Ashley, the better. Okay. And then because people aren't on site at the moment, that's an issue, you see, because you can't ring them.
Yeah.
That's annoying as well. Like, trying to find a number. I think I went through like 3 or 4 different numbers, and at the end I was just like, look, you need to just let me know. And then that's when Bajan got in touch.
Old Del boy, yeah.
Hannah, I haven't applied yet because I couldn't do mine online last time when I was trying to apply because I couldn't get the right code. So what they did is they send me the form to fill manually.
Okay.
So I will download and fill that and do it that way.
Yeah. And at least you're behind the guys that have actually got onto it. But George is struggling still. Yeah. And he's doing nothing wrong. And then I get emails saying, can you chase them up about enrolling? And they're almost laughing. And George is saying, I'm currently laughing, because they're not getting back to me. And yet I've done everything. It's just embarrassing.
Did the CMI people ever get back to you?
What, for the membership?
Yeah. Because I haven't heard anything back, and neither's Aid.
No, and
Yeah,
I bet Brenda hasn't. I will chase up on that. I did contact them same night.
Yeah, you CC'd us on the email, didn't you? So yeah.
So yeah, let me know. Answer to that. So that's Lynn. Donald, CMI times 3. Yeah, because it's really useful. They're really, really good resources, and it's good to have their membership. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. So, yeah, I'm sure I'll speak to you all.
See you all soon.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. That's been great.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.